kind of fine tune the problems.
Okay, so we are live and audience will start joining in. So the problem with YouTube live stream is people tend to get the notification 10 minutes late. So we'll have a dry audience for like absolutely dry audience for 10 to 15 minutes. Then we'll start people will start reeling in. Okay.
Yeah, cool. So, I did one live stream in the past, and I just found it overwhelming. The amount of different things going on, just like programs behind the scenes as well. Something I'd like to learn more. Like, but it's
I have to handle everything. I have to focus on the conversation because obviously it's a deep, insightful conversation. I have to focus on the chat. I have to focus on the technical issues. Focus on the voice modulation. Sometimes it peaks. If it peaks, it is destroyed. The podcast is destroyed.
Let me know if I'm peaking too much because
I have set your audio at a moderate level, so it's fine. Okay, Radio Wave has joined in. Hi, bro. Please reel in people. Please share this stream. Today we are having with us James. Very, very beautiful mind, and I came across his channel for obvious reasons, searching for what's going in and around the field of philosophy, being a curious fool and stumbling across James' channel. And James has been doing a tremendous job right there, and I have mentioned his channel link in my description of the video for obvious reasons, because I cannot mention him, me not having that subscriber, so I cannot mention him. So yeah, you can go and check his videos out. They are pretty you have to be somewhere or the other good with philosophy to understand James' video, because they are very deep, they're very well articulated. And James, I'd just like to say this one thing to you, man. I like some of the concepts, like when I click your videos, like I'm beginner to philosophy, and during the conversation also do correct me if I tend to sway away from the topic. And the thing is, when I click on your video, I'm a bit overwhelmed, intimidated whilst I'm clicking your video. Why? Because I'm new to this whole genre of philosophy and existentialism. Me writing stuff, but not the what people have written, what are the basic terms and all that stuff, what were the other philosophers preaching. So it's quite intimidating, but seeing your videos, the way you articulate them is phenomenal. So it becomes
cool. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it becomes very easy for everyone to understand. Okay, so James, we'll be taking a couple of questions, like people would be posing in their questions in the chat.
Yeah.
We'll have a conversation in between. When we both are out of words, we'll just take a couple of questions, right? Okay, so hello James, where are you from? James would answer that.
I am from a city called Limerick in Ireland. So kind of between Europe and America, I guess, if you're not familiar with where Ireland is.
Ireland, a beautiful country. So the topic for today, because you all saw the thumbnail and clicked on it, the topic of today is suffering. We thought of keeping it very basic for you guys, so that you guys could have a gist of that topic. We'll be talking about suffering and the things revolving in and around suffering. So James, my first thing to you is, like, suffering has an altogether different meaning. Suffering, when it comes to a psychological meaning and a philosophical meaning, might be very different. What's your thought on that? What's your take on that?
Do you think? Do you think there's a big difference between
there might
psychological and philosophical?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say. Well, personally, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
Maybe like certain philosophers would define it in certain ways, but I think in general, suffering is the distinction I make is between pain and suffering. So pain being just a negative physical sensation, whereas suffering being something more psychological and spiritual, I think, than simply physical.
Okay.
So I'd make that distinction rather than a psychological philosophical one. But that could be like I have particular tastes with philosophy, so it tends to lean in the direction of psychology anyway. So maybe more technical philosophers might. I don't think so though. I'm pretty sure it would be pointless to define philosophy, to define suffering beyond what psychology entails it to be.
You know why I was having this question inside of my mind? As I was setting up my messed up softbox before you coming in, I just got this question popped up inside of my head, which is, for example, we think someone is thinking we are in despair, right? We are in suffering. We are going through a tremendous pain, tormentation, whatever you call it as. And you go to a psychologist, right? Clinical psychologist. You tell him all this stuff. You try to, like, if someone is a philosopher in suffering, okay, he goes to a psychologist and tells him, this is what I'm going through. How will that psychologist interpret his suffering? You know what I mean? He'll tend to look for he'll try to sway him away from the miraculous words that he's been using and try to calm his nerves down by saying that this is a physical disorder which you are having. You know what I mean?
Okay, I see. Yeah, but I think that there are different schools of psychology, so that, like, depending on the school of psychology, you're going to get something raw or so. Yeah, like if you're coming from, you say, like a clinical psychologist, they might go in general more towards like a materialist paradigm, so more looking at it merely from let's just look at the kind of the surface level, and rather than, whereas if you look at Jungian psychology, you're going to get, or even Freudian psychology, you're going to get a completely different sense of what the meaning of that suffering is. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from now. I think that's going to be between different schools of psychology who have different philosophies of what they're doing, rather than a neat divide between philosophy and psychology, unless you consider Jung and Freud to be more philosophers than psychologists. But I definitely think there's, I can see what you mean, but I would say it depends on the psychologist you get, what response you're going to get. It depends on whether they're, are they leaning more towards CBT, or they're leaning more towards depth psychology, psychoanalysis. And I think that would be the difference.
This was a very interesting answer, as from my point of view, you talking about the school of thought, because back here in India, I've gone to a couple of psychologists, and I was going through the phases of insecurity that I used to have, insecurities coming out of various reasons. So I used to go to psychologists. I didn't, the thing is, every psychologist tend to treat you in the same manner. I don't know what's that thing actually is. They tend to talk you out of things, which is psychoanalysis, having a transaction with the client or with the patient. The psychologists trying to have a transaction with the patient so that they could churn out things from inside, hidden things. There might be some hidden things. So this concept of school of thought was pretty interesting, because when, and we'll try to touch capitalization and how capitalization has destroyed all the fields, like psychology nowadays. Like back here in India, again a third world country, psychology is looked down upon. They're useless. Psychologists are useless. Like if you call a psychologist doctor, like, come on, he's not a doctor. You are, because the concept of school of thought is not too much in audacity back here.
Right. Yeah. So I think a psychiatrist by definition has to be a doctor, but I know what you're saying. That's splitting hairs, but why do you think that is?
Yeah. So that is where the problem creeps in. Yeah.
Do you have a sense for why that would be the case in India? Why psychologists would be considered so useless?
Because people want to be their own problem solvers, and they cannot be. You know what I mean? Like they are having a problem. They don't know shit about their problem. And you are also allowed to cuss in the stream. So yeah, they don't know shit about their problem, and they tend to be their own problem solvers. They think that their elders, who, because of them being aged, them experiencing more life than the younger people, have seen more darker side or more of life. So whenever there is a problem back here in India, specifically talking about India, and that would be the case in all the southern part of this Asian subcontinent, you have a problem, go to someone who is elder to you. Do not go to a psychologist.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, psychologist would mess you up, but rather an elder would
just will mess you up.
Yeah.
And what was your experience? Did you find that it helped?
No, it didn't help actually. The thing is, they tend to give you a couple of exercises. I learned the real meaning of suffering when I was going through insecurity. People think me to be, when they see my content, they think that after my father passing away, I'm in actual suffering. Okay, I am in suffering, but I have faced the real suffering, coming out of insecurity that built around me, which might sound very mediocre to everyone else.
There's an interesting distinction there you're saying between real suffering and, let's say, the suffering that you've experienced after your father. Can you explore that distinction a bit? Like, so what's the real suffering and what's the, we'll say, grief, I'm guessing, is what you're experiencing with your father, or maybe a sense of being overwhelmed. But yeah, what's that distinction?
I'll just say that I believe the suffering could be characterized according to what kind of things which you are going through. Like a suffering which is revolving around you, your insecurities, like what will people think of me? How do people take me? That is also a kind of suffering, because sometimes it happens is you want to change it, but you are lethargic enough not to change it, so you are swinging there, because you cannot take that step. You do not want to step out of your comfort, whatever you call it, as bubble, comfort zone,
comfort zone,
yeah, and change that. But if you change that, that's a beautiful world, right yes. There. But when talking about death, the other day we were talking about that platform and free falling state and all that stuff. Talking about death, that's altogether a different thing. That's altogether a different game. That's suffering trying to, remove its clothes and standing naked in front of you. Like you go anywhere that's in front of you, you do anything. It's like when you see someone who is walking in front of you, sitting, eating with you, sleeping beside you, talking with you, scolding you, always being possessive for you, that voice always guiding you, whatever that is, whatever a father is meant to do, that's gone. Now that's something which shows you. When it came to death, we'll also cover the philosophy of death. When it came to death, I don't know why, whenever I used to listen to someone dying, I just used to smile, or I used to get this laugh, not to mock his death or her death, but just, I had this thing. My mother used to call me like, you have gone ill, man. Why are you doing?
Was it like an inappropriate, like just a laugh you couldn't control?
I was like not laughing like a lunatic or something, but yeah, okay, he died, okay. But like not taking death very seriously, not knowing the meaning of death, because you think, because you don't tend to, how many people do think of their death? How many people are always vexated about that thought of them not being, that it might happen someday that you will not be around your friends, you will not be here, you will not be there, you will not be doing, I'll not be having a podcast with someone else, right? So that thought do not creep into you until and unless you see someone close to you going away. That's suffering. Like that's something which tells you that what is all this for? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but just a few minutes ago, you said that what you're experiencing now with your father's death isn't real suffering. Like you experienced real suffering in the past, but from what you're saying,
I was like, this was more like, this was more like that I have gone through that, so I didn't lose myself. I didn't go to a state where I'm losing myself. Like after my father passing away, 3 days later, I was back to work.
And do you consider that sense of losing yourself to be what true suffering is?
No. If you lose yourself, you're gone. That's what I believe.
But to go back to your earlier point about what you experienced in the past was true suffering.
Yeah. But I didn't lose myself still. Losing yourself is altogether a different game. It's altogether a different realm. It's
so that's a different thing again. But let's dig down in this idea of like what real suffering is.
Yeah, I'll just draw a diagram and tell you if you want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
just try to explain you in a diagrammatic form. So like, okay, I have this page, but it is very bright, so I'd not be able to show you guys. So let me tell you like this. Let me try to get this thing to you. So like, you don't know. You don't know what the meaning of suffering is. Let's take you are a child, right? you're happy, you're enjoying the best days of your life, you're getting what you wanted, right? Not taking into example people, children whose parents bash them up and make them work and all that. That's a situation which is exceptional, right? So we'll take a normal child who is happy in his life, not thinking about stuff, not thinking about the relationships around them, and thinking about what's gonna happen after 5 years, 4 years, financial worries and all that stuff. Okay, now you start growing up. Okay, you start growing up. You start to feel, to grab the essence around you. You start to see people around you. You start to see how they reflect. By reflection, I mean is how they introspect your conversation, how they reflect when you talk to them. Do they like you? Do they not like you? You start seeing that. When you are a child, you don't give a flying F to whatever is happening around you.
There's an increase in the complexity of your cognition, so you become aware, and Piaget's like stages of cognitive development would be a part of that. But also there's post-Piagetian of like being able to take other people's perspective. As a kid, you're almost just immersed in life, and depending on what stage you're at, you have more and more of a grasp of what's going on around you. But there's a big shift when you enter adolescence of being not overwhelmed for some, but like being very aware of the perspectives of others, and beginning to take more responsibility for your life. So having to take more of a long-term perspective. So not only you saddled with the perspective of others, but you're saddled with the perspective of you for the rest of your life. So it's an increase in the complexity of your cognition.
So it's like an onion bulb, like an onion which has many layers, or a cabbage. When you're growing up, you tend to peel some layers, and then you go to the core. Then you tend to know how good that onion actually was. Or you can't tell an onion being rotten from the outside. That's how we get our onions back here in India. You have to peel them off to see what's the core inside. And when you peel everything out, that's when you know, okay, this is life.
That was a good onion. I shouldn't have cut it. Shouldn't have cut it up. I should have left the onion intact. It's got a good heart.
But that is also a gamble, That is also a gamble. True. If you left it intact without exploring it, you know what I mean? Then it could eat you away. That is what I said when I said you will lose yourself. Like if something hits you, like what I mean to say is the analogy which we are talking about, onion, right? You're peeling away the layers of the onion. Someone peels it and sees that it is all beautiful, the onion is all fine. We didn't need to peel the onion. But if it would have been rotten inside, it could have taken the whole of onion. It could have destroyed the whole thing.
That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just trying to wrap my head because you are the only one who has asked such in-depth question to me, taking me to and fro. So I'm trying to wrap my heads around that. And if I sound very mediocre,
Yeah, it just sounds like you had a different. I'm curious about your. It sounds like you're handling the death of your father. Like it's challenging, but it's not necessarily overwhelming. Like you said, you were back to work within 3 days.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the experience you had when you were younger was much more intense or much more challenging.
Because that is when I faced it for the first time. When you see something for the first time, you're very overwhelmed. But when you see that again, it's very hitting for you, but not that much hitting, because that is something which is inevitable. The thought of something being inevitable should not creep onto your mind. Like as I told you, I have a community of 170 people on WhatsApp. So a couple of people also lost their parents to COVID, and they were not able to cope up from that. Life is all destroyed. Life is a curse. These were the words of those people. Life is a curse. Life is destroyed. Our guardian has now gone. Who will look after and all that stuff? And I was like, man, come on. That's inevitable. That if that has happened, it has happened. So if that is when you lose yourself, that is when you lose yourself. You give in to the obvious. Like death is the only constant in life. That's for a fact. It's the only constant. Like the day you are born, you are going to die. You take any pill, you take anything, that's the only constant that is there, which is death. So it's inevitable. So, losing yourself to a concept like that, or losing yourself to a concept related to the suffering related to that, is very mediocre. So that is what I've been trying to cover in my book too. 3, 4.
There's actually there's an interesting story I remember hearing about the Buddhist story. I think a woman came to the Buddha and she was in this kind of a state, and I think her child had died, and she was inconsolable. She wouldn't talk to anyone else. Talks to the Buddha, and he says, oh yeah, because she went to some other wise men asking them to bring her child back, asking them to bring her healing, and she went to the Buddha, and the Buddha was like, okay, I can do something for you. And she's like, I knew you would be able to. You're a great spirit or whatever. And he says, you just have to go to the house of someone. You have to get 3 mustard seeds from a house where no one has died. I think that was his words. And so she goes off believing, that this is going to be the great quest, and she's going to find what she's looking for. And she goes from house to house to house to house. And inevitably she sees in every house someone has lost someone. And eventually I think it clicks with her, and she's like, oh, okay, this is universal. This is reality. And I think she comes to accept it in some way, because well, as you say, it's a natural part of the human condition. So once you are confronted with it enough, well, yeah, she came back from it in that sense of she came to peace with the idea of suffering, even if it was extremely challenging. But yeah, I guess not everyone does, but I think there's a natural human thing. I think it's harder without religion to do it. Like, religion offers this easier story that kind of, it's inherently meaningful. Like, for me, religion is something that is bubbled up from the collective unconscious. It's something that's deeply meaningful and offers like, a lot of the time in life you don't need religion, or at least in the West we don't really think about religion much until it comes to a crisis point, until it comes to the point where you need it, because life is so comfortable now. There isn't that much war, there isn't that much disease. So it's only when you really come to the edge where you truly meet suffering that all of a sudden those big questions begin to be asked. Because you can ask, like, philosophically, you can ask what's the meaning of death, you can ask what's the meaning of suffering, but it's kind of, in some sense it's idle, in some sense it's not really, it doesn't matter until you've got skin in the game. It doesn't matter until your heart is in it. You know what I mean? Like, people can talk about death and think about death a lot, but until you're facing your own death, and this is kind of like there's a trope in TV and movies of, and I guess in culture in general, of someone getting a terminal diagnosis. So they were living their life in a certain way, and then they're told they're going to die in a certain period of time. Like, they're given a terminal diagnosis, and it changes their outlook on the world. It completely changes the way they live their life then. And even if they recover from that illness, we'll say, as happens in some of the movies, then they're transformed by that experience with death. And as you say, everyone knows that they're going to die, but there's a difference between, like, head knowledge and heart knowledge. There's a difference between knowing you're going to die and then being aware, like, feeling that in your heart. And I think that's a transformative experience, and that gives life a lot more meaning. And it's at times like that when the questions that religion is trying to answer become truly meaningful, and where the practice of religion can become something that actually sustains you in life. And I think that's been a big loss in the West. And I think, I'm not sure to what extent, but I definitely think it plays a role in the mental health crisis that we're now seeing in the West. Like, the suicide is becoming it's really, I remember seeing a statistic that in the UK, in Britain and England, the number one killer of men under 45 is suicide. Like, or it's the number two killer is suicide. So it's becoming a major problem. And I think it's because we don't have something meaningful to grab onto when the ship is going down. And while we can live most of our lives without those deep answers, we're kind of all alone when it comes to that time, which is, and that's what I find fascinating about suffering, is that you have to experience it to really, for it to really matter. It's something that's purely experiential, and it completely changes your outlook on life. It completely changes the value of everything else that's going on. And you could question what the value of that is. Like, it doesn't matter more. Do the beliefs you hold in suffering, are they epistemically equal to the beliefs you hold when you're not suffering, when you're comfortable? Like, which one has more epistemological value? Like, which one has more meaning, has more truth? The answer you find when you're suffering, or the answer you find when you're comfortable? And that's why I think there's something really important there that is kind of missed, I think, or that is overlooked.
Yeah, I get you. A little perspective to the religion thing. Like, when I was trying to tell people that me leaving my religion, and why? Because I would see 20 years down the line what religion would do to a person who is suffering. So let's say in the Abrahamic religion, there is this concept of afterlife, for obvious reasons, hell and heaven and all that stuff. So the thing is, when a person is going through suffering, and they tend to find a resort in religion, like we pray, we find a sense of calm and comfort, right? So they tend to attach their feelings to that specific religion. Whenever, like for example, in Islam, we have to pray 5 times a day. 5 times a day. Even if you miss one time, you'll be burned in hell. This is what is written in the Quran, right? Like in Christianity also, the hardcore Catholic Christians, if you miss the mass on the Sundays, or you don't wear a cross, that's a sin. I believe that's a sin. I don't know if that's
but you can go to confession in Christianity.
Yeah, but
you can get all that wiped away.
But so back here, it's the confession is a hell lot of worsened. So the thing is, you tend to attach your suffering with something which is metaphysical. You don't know what's let's face the reality. You don't know what's gonna happen. Everything which has been told to you, the cults which were mesmerizing, all these things telling you again and again, these have been going on through cults and coming to you. So all these cults, all these people who were spreading this knowledge were human beings. Okay, they're biological beings. Blood running through their veins, having a heart just like you, pooping in the morning, eating at night. That is what their life is all about on its base level. They are telling you to attach your feeling. You're going through suffering. Find your resort in God. Just go and find your resort in God. And even if you, you found your resort in God, you found your peace in praying, you found your peace in religion. But what you are doing is, it's like, let's take this like a dopamine hit which you are taking from religion. You are getting your panic attacks due to suffering. You go and start praying. I ask you, just don't pray once. You will mess yourself up. Your head will just explode.
You think you'll mess yourself up by praying?
By not praying. By not praying. You were going through sheer suffering. You converted to a religion, or you say you embrace religion. So much so that religion is the only sense of resort that you have in this entire world. God is the only sense of resort in this entire world. And your connection with God is some kind of ritual. Some kind of prayer, the rosary beads which we were talking about, the rosary beads, or going to the church, going to the mosque, going to the temple, going to wherever you think your God is. So that specific ritual is a bridge between your relationship and God, between you and God. I ask you, just break that bridge for once. Just break that bridge. Can you construct it yet again? Okay, you'll say, okay, we can construct that yet again, but the fear which accompanies it is far greater. Say
that again. So your closing point is that the fear.
Yeah, the fear of losing religion is far greater than the suffering you were in. Because you are going to get, because let's take this like this. Just a couple of minutes I'll take and then we'll move ahead. We'll take this like this. You are in a zone of suffering, utter suffering, and someone tells you become religious, start praying. So praying was a solution to your problem, a singular solution to your problem. There was no solution. You thought there's no solution. No one can give me a solution in this world. So let me resort to a metaphysical ritual or something which is related to God. I'll become religious. So that was the only solution. Now I'm asking you, 10 years down the line, after 10 years, okay, you are out of your suffering, you are happy. I ask you to break that faith. I ask you to leave that. Just leave that for once. Someone will tell, why should I leave that? Who are you to tell me to leave my faith or my religion? I'm not asking you to leave that for the entirety of your life. Just for a couple of days, try to leave that. Don't leave your religion. Don't stop going to the mosque, but just get this thought of leaving your faith or leaving your religion. The thoughts of that suffering will start recurring again. That wave will be more powerful. You know what I mean?
I don't think so.
Because you have taken the only solution that person had from his life.
Yeah, but let's say the suffering is caused by the loss of someone. So let's say someone loses someone loses someone really close to them, and they're experiencing an overwhelming amount of grief. And what religion allows them to do is it gives them a sense of meaning. It's like, I will see them in the afterlife. I will, they're like, there's that initial burst of grief that is almost unmanageable and wants to drown you. And by having this metaphysical meaning, or any meaning, I think if you have that's that Nietzschean idea of he who has a why can handle almost any how. If you have a meaning, you can handle the things that happen to you. But religion gives you specific meaning. So let's say in this example, you've got a metaphysical meaning of this idea of the afterlife. Now, the effects of grief will diminish in the mind with time. Like grief is just something, you just need something to kind of get through it as those initial waves. Now, I think if it's further down the line, a few years down the line, and you've kind of gotten over the grief, just because you stop praying, it doesn't mean that those sharks of suffering are going to grab you again. I don't psychologically, I don't think that makes sense. I would see it more like the way you can use antidepressants for someone who is depressed. You give them antidepressants for, would say, 3 months, and then that gives them that allows them to get from 0 to 1. At which point they can start looking after themselves. At which point they can start doing the routines, exercising, eating well, sleeping well. These are the things that will help you have a more solid mental health from then on. So religion can help you get to that point. I don't think just because you then stop the antidepressants, it doesn't mean you fall back into the depression. So I think psychologically, I don't really think what you're saying. Yeah,
that's more of a physical perspective. We tend to take that as
but I'm just looking at the psychology of suffering. It's something different to the theological point of view. Because I'm not really concerned here with religion as whether it's true or not, but pragmatically, is it useful? Why is religion evolved? Why is that part of, if you take an evolutionary lens, why is religion here? What purpose does it serve? And some atheists would say it serves no purpose. It's a mind virus. But that doesn't really make sense to me. It's bizarrely illogical to me. It seems that religion offers a meaning to those who are in the throes of suffering. And not just that, but it's not just an individual meaning. It's a social meaning, and it bonds people together, and it lowers the level of suffering for the individual when you come to the extremes, but also it has extreme social roles. And there's something else in what you're saying as well, where your perspective on religion seems to be black or white. It seems to be either people are all in, and maybe this is what it's like with Islam. I don't have as much experience with Islam, but definitely with other religions that I've seen, it's not like you have to do every single word of it. Like as I said, with the Christian tradition, you can not go to a Sunday mass and you can get confession, and it's not like God is going to hold that one missed mass against you. So there's a lot more leeway there. It's not like this rigid fundamentalism, which is, religion isn't just this rigid fundamentalism. There's much looser varieties. And even there's a great story from Sufi. Have you heard of the Sufi tradition? So it's an Islamic, I think it's Iranian
Islamics don't consider themselves those people as Muslims, you know.
The Sufis or
Sufis are kind of, they call themselves as Muslims, but it's the hardcore Islamic people don't consider them as Muslims because they dance and sing and all that stuff, and which is forbidden in Islam.
Yeah, I mean that, which is interesting in itself, that like what makes one more Muslim than the other? You know what I mean? Like what makes the fundamentalist group able to say to the Sufis that you're not Islamic? But anyway, the story is of this one Sufi saint who goes into a town one day, and you're not supposed to eat bread on certain days, or you're not supposed to eat anything on certain days. And I guess maybe it was a day of Ramadan.
It's Ramadan, yeah.
But he goes into this marketplace, and he goes into the new town, new marketplace, and all the people are gathering around like, oh, this is this great saint. And he sits down in the middle of the marketplace, takes a bit of bread and starts eating it. And they're like, oh, this is no saint. This is a horrible man kind of thing. And his disciples gather around him. They're like, what are you doing? Like, we thought you were a holy man. And he says, the law was made for man, not man for the law. And that's something that I find quite profound. That like, it's, I don't think obviously fundamentalism is in direct disagreement with that. It says, no, we have to literally follow every word that's in the Bible, every word that's in the Quran. And that's one attitude towards religion, but I don't think that is religion by definition, even if it's a very popular form nowadays. Because I think religion being under attack, it's had to either tighten up and become extremely rigid and fundamentalist, or else it fears that it's letting in too much secularism, it's leaning too much towards atheism. So it finds itself almost drowning, which is an interesting perspective. But I definitely don't think that it's fundamentalism or nothing, or you're not religious. To me, that seems absurd.
So coming back to that, what was the quote which you quoted by Nietzsche?
He who has a why can handle almost any how.
So for me, the why is what I like to ask people is, why at what cost? You know? So because when I question the faith of people, specifically Muslim people, I see the fear in their eyes. I've seen it. I've seen the torment. I've seen the life reflecting in front of their eyes. I've seen their life reflecting and their afterlife too. They think that, oh, this guy is questioning our faith. And if we fall to him, we are going to burn in hell for the next 10,000 years after we die. You know what I mean? So that is...
but that's not all Muslims. That might be your... Like,
the people which I've seen. Like, we can take many examples. There are many exceptions, right? But what I feel is sticking to something, for me, for obvious reasons, your perspectives might be different. My perspective could altogether be different. Sticking to a thing, finding a singular solution, finding a resort in one particular thing is absolute no-no. Because solution is like an escape to anything. How far are you going to escape? You know, if you try to watch my video, the latest video on suffering, which I did give. So I'm trying to explain this. Like, if you try to find a solution, like religion, if you try to take religion as a one-stop destination to your suffering, then my friend, you are trying to find a resort in a kind of escape mechanism. You're trying to run away from that rather embracing it. Okay, now there is again a philosophical difference between following religion and calling yourself as embracing it, and following religion. Why? Because you want to run away from suffering. And that's a distinction very few make. And if you make that distinction, then you'll leave religion behind, because you'll go beyond religion. You know what I mean?
So say that last part to me again. If you
there's a distinction that you're going through suffering, you embrace religion, and you said that I'm out of suffering. Religion solved my suffering. And the second thing is you are embracing religion to run away from suffering and calling yourself free from suffering. You know what I mean? So this is something which came just now in my head. So yeah.
Are you psychologically free from suffering, or?
That again depends on the biological complications you are having because of the psychological shit which is happening inside of your head. You know? So like you can altogether extract your if you believe in mind and all that stuff, the voice which is chatting inside of your head, which I call as a demon, which I refer to as demon and have been referring to as demon inside of my head, is altogether different from it doesn't need your like your psychology, because psychological effects tend to affect you more biologically. You tend to get
to
sorry
what other effect than biologically, like what?
Psychologically, if you are being tormented psychologically, then if we look at the psychology or anything which we call it as, you are seeing a release of chemicals, release of some sort of chemicals to some sort of electrical imbalances inside of your head, neuron imbalances inside of your head. So altogether, in the base level, it's a biological messed up thing.
I mean, that's a hypothesis. I mean, it's the most popular hypothesis at the moment, but it's still a hypothesis, which again is coming out of a materialist paradigm that prioritizes what's happening in the brain rather than seeing that the mind is an equally valid thing. That like,
okay, man.
Let me think of a good experiment here that shows this. But they've been looking at how the mind-body connection can work the other way around. So there's only one experiment that's coming to mind. So it's a great book by a woman called Kelly McGonigal called The Upside of Stress. And she talks about how your perceptions of things that are happening to you change the neurochemical experience of it. So it's not just that the biology causes the psychology, but also the psychology can have a reverse feedback effect on the biology. So I think it's too clean to say that like if you're having a psychological problem, it's just biological and we should throw medication at it. That's kind of that's the general argument.
Yeah, okay. So I should have used might be. My bad.
Yeah, just because I think that's just like a working hypothesis, and I think it's kind of I think it's a damaging one, and it's one we're moving away from. Like I think it's part of the picture. I think there are definitely certain cases of depression that might just be chemical imbalances in the brain and they're much more biological. But I think it's the interplay between the psychology, between the mind and the body that creates the experience of suffering. And I think there are very different varieties. So.
Okay, I get you now. So that's why I told you, whenever I'm wrong, please point me out. Okay, just a minute, James. There's some rift going on in the chat section.
Oh, sorry, right.
Okay, so someone is saying, Wasiullah Ahmed. No, we consider them Muslim. Okay, that might be Sufi. No, my friend, if you consider Sufis as Muslim, then you have not read the Quran, because Sufis...
this is the debate that's going on?
Yeah, there's a debate between Joshua Benjamin and Wasiullah Ahmed. So the thing is, so he's saying you are making a wrong claim. Only Ahmadiyas are considered non-Muslim. No, my friend. Do you know that dancing and playing music in Islam is haram? First things first. Second, Sufis do cannabis. And don't you know that doing any sort of drugs or cannabis is a forbidden like shit in Islam?
Has this person talked to all Sufis and they all do?
Most of them.
Marijuana,
most of them. There is a cannabis culture in a sect of Sufis. So so if you have read the Quran well, you should be knowing that dancing is forbidden in Islam, cannabis is forbidden in Islam.
Dancing is forbidden in Islam.
Yeah. So Sufis, the whole concept of Sufism is spiritual dancing and spirituality, and using psychedelics. Many of them use psychedelics and cannabis to, So don't trigger so easily, people. We are here for having a philosophical discussion.
That's so funny though. For me, this is really interesting because it's just not a perspective I would normally get. So that's so, really that's really cool. Okay.
Joshua is bashing him. Okay, circumcision and all that stuff. Muslim women are in suffering. All that stuff. Please, people, don't fight. And the thing is, Islam revealed nothing new. Okay, that wasn't already written by someone else. Okay, let these people have their go. Let these people.
Is this ongoing?
Yeah, it's ongoing. Do you have a mobile or something in front of you? Cell phone?
I'm just gonna get it up here. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, you can go and check that out. So,
That's funny.
Okay, so please have a sense of tolerance inside of you if you are coming to a philosophical discussion, or else you can just leave the channel. I don't want to read Imam Ghazali. All I know is dancing is forbidden. First things first, cannabis is forbidden, and I'll open this thing for you. The Sufi tradition attributes the discovery of cannabis to Jafar Shirazi or Sheikh Haidar, a Sufi leader in the 12th century. Okay. So yeah, they do cannabis and dance. So that's forbidden in Islam. So yeah, Sufis, many, you might be considering them as Muslims, but many do not consider them as Muslims. So yeah, that's.
Would they consider themselves as Muslims?
Can you repeat that?
Do you think a Sufi would consider himself a Muslim?
I have not talked to any Sufi, but
you know that they all do weed, but that they just don't know that they consider themselves. It seems to me that a much larger percentage of Muslim or of Sufis would consider themselves Muslim. I feel like if that's a blanket statement, we could make a lot quicker than we could say that they're all smoking weed. But that's maybe just bring it a bit too much.
Sufis are known as the insane Muslims. Sufis are known as the insane Muslims.
Yeah, they're definitely a different bunch.
So there is a hierarchy. There is a hierarchy which is being made in Islam. There has been an hierarchy, and there are many different things going in and around Islam. There are many different things. Many people have given out many books related to the life of Prophet, which was obviously released 150 years after him passing away. All the books written by his disciples and all that stuff. So I thought there was ones.
I thought one was written within 40 or 50 years. No, was it not? One's written sooner, I thought.
Yeah. So the thing is, so there was a research paper. I don't know. I don't remember the name. Giving that Quran was released after 140 years. The full book Quran was released 140 years.
But I mean, of the life of the Prophet, I thought I remembered. 160. I read a biography of Muhammad a couple of years back, and I thought there was someone more sooner, because even Jesus's the Gospels would have been.
There are many books. There are many volumes. Yeah. There's not only one volume. There are many.
But I just mean the earliest one that would have
been
written after.
Might be. So yeah, that is why I told you, man, I have to start reading. Because I tend to rely on having debates with people and what people tend to say and reading research papers. So yeah, I have to start reading more. So yeah, I try to take many perspectives and try to find the basic essence in that. What is the one common thing all these people are saying? That might be something, or is it just a rumor? So I take out that basic essence, just like taking out an average of something, essence, and go and check that out on the internet and then find out if it's true or not. So that is how I learned.
That's one way to do, yeah. And if you're reading research papers, I mean, I don't think it's absolutely necessary that everyone read. I think we've all got different learning styles. But I think we should all be learning. I think if you're learning from videos, if you're learning from books, to me it's just a different form of digesting information, which is interesting.
Okay, so this guy is still fighting, bro. I think you have a very fallible knowledge of Quran and Islam. Okay, you have a good knowledge. All the best to you. First things first.
I like Joshua Benjamin saying, he's talking about ogres have layers like onions. Shrek said so.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
Good stuff. So yeah, from tomorrow onwards, I expect you to do some cannabis and dance in your room like a wild man. So
I've done a lot of that in my life.
Yeah, you should be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and I haven't yet burned in the fires of hell, but there's plenty of time there's all eternity for that.
All eternity. Okay, so man. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just something that gets me is just this idea of this is my trouble with the afterlife idea, right? Is when I look at it from a psychological point of view, which is what I was doing earlier in this conversation, it makes perfect sense to me. It's like it has a psychological function. I can see a pragmatic reason for believing in an afterlife. But what's interesting is when you put two of them together and you say, okay, unless you're praying 5 times a day, or you're following everything that's in the Quran, God forbid you dance or smoke some weed. But as long as you're doing all these things, then you won't go to hell. Now, what about someone who's like an Eskimo? An Eskimo, not now, but like a few hundred years ago. So they had no chance. They never met someone who was a Muslim. They could never have heard about the Prophet. Is that person automatically doomed to burn in the fires of hell? Because it seems very unfair. That's kind of going to like this idea of predetermination. Like when you're born, you already know if you're gonna. But like the chances of someone going to hell are much higher.
I'll answer this.
Born way over there. And then like, so I'll just throw another thing in here is that, okay, that's the Eskimo. He doesn't have a thing of hell. But what happens when you come to like the Christians, and the Christians say, well, if you believe anything other than what it says in the Bible or outside of our sect within Christianity, then you're going to go to hell. And then you've got two perspectives that are talking about salvation. And you're just like, well, which one do I pick? I'll probably pick the one that most of the people in my country practice rather than the one. And it just seems terribly unfair it's something that always puzzled me of just like, okay, I get it from a psychological point of view, but if you're taking it as truth and you run into someone else who's more or less the same belief that you need to follow these so-and-so rules in order to not go to hell for eternity, but their rules are slightly different and there's a different name on the book. So which one of you is going to hell? You don't know. Like,
I'll answer your question, because this is the same question which I asked to the religious scholar who used to come and teach me when I was 8. Really, the Muslim scholars, you have to read the Quran and all that stuff. So I was 8 or 9 and I asked this question, and the answer which came out of him. So these people have a very witty answer for everything. So he's like, so I asked the same question, like, if nobody, what is their role if they are not told about the concept of Islam? Why will they be burned in hell? Because there are quotations in Islam that all those who are non-Muslims would be burned in hell. Right? So the answer which these people give is, there is some sort of let's say insight or some sort of intuition which is bestowed in the heart of a man by Allah. If he's a Christian, he'll be bestowed with the thought that, oh, I should be converting to Islam because Islam is the only truth, the absolute truth, and Allah is the only God. So they are like, this is the insight, this is the intuition which will get, and you'll be given a chance by Allah to convert into Islam or not. And if you don't,
but if you're someone born in, like, sticking with the Inuit examples, if you're someone that was born, let's say, in North or South America 1,000 years ago, before like 700 or 800 years before Islam had ever reached the shores, that little inkling could be in your heart, but God or Allah hasn't given you any way for that seed to blossom into something that can save you, because Islam has never reached your shores from life to death. How the hell can you convert to Islam if it's not even possible?
So it's like, it's an evergreen thing. Islam is an evergreen thing. It existed way before Christianity ever existed. Allah existed way before this earth was made. So it's the absolute truth. So this is how this.
So you have to follow the words of Muhammad even before Muhammad existed. What about all the people before Muhammad?
Yeah.
What about people in like 5th century AD living in Mecca, and there's close to the parties you can get, but they can never get salvation?
Yeah. So like you will, if you are coming from that place, like people before that who didn't know about that, I haven't gone, I'll not answer this particular question of yours which you asked before that, because I've also thought of that but never asked this. But this is the only thing which they give about this intuition and thing which this is, I never pondered on this specific question, that what before Muhammad gave the actual religion. You know what I mean? Like the actual people who were following Moses. Like, again, they tend to make concepts like there were 100,000 prophets that came on this earth, sent by Allah. 100,000 prophets.
When?
The first prophet was Adam. In Islam, he's known as Adam. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
First prophet.
Like Moses is also considered a prophet.
Yeah. So they have Adam, and then Moses is also considered to be a prophet sent by God. Then Jesus, prophet sent by God, and people misinterpreted him.
I can guarantee, like, Moses wasn't following all the rules that are in the Quran.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
So because because the Quran hadn't been written, all the stipulations that are in, I bet you I can go through the Bible and find someone who danced, or someone who smoked weed, or someone who broke some prohibition, someone who didn't follow Ramadan. Moses probably didn't follow Ramadan before Muhammad was born.
There is another answer to that. They are like, Bible has been changed many a times by all these kings.
So Moses did follow the rules of the Quran
so
before.
If you watch a couple of videos, have you known of this guy Zakir Naik?
No.
Zakir Naik is an Islamic scholar online. He tends to go head-on debates with people. Head-on debates with people and converting them.
Yeah, kind of like the way Christopher Hitchens.
Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens is more logical. That guy is more logical.
Yeah.
More
Richard
logical.
Dawkins is much more passionate. And I find his disdain for religion kind of quite distasteful. But yeah. It's anyway, we've gone very far off track here.
We have gone very far off track. So to conclude all of this, I'm not an Islamic scholar. I'll not comment too much on that. I do not find any meaning, any logic in this particular religion, so that's why I don't follow.
But I can see how it can, if you are a believer in Islam, I can see how it can psychologically, how it can be of assistance in when you're experiencing suffering. And I think that the benefits of religion, would I go so far as to say they outweigh the negatives?
Like, you can see one example right here in the chat,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I think fundamentalist religion is a new variety of and it seems like fundamentalism to me when it's talking about like that you have to obey every single word of the Quran. Like, people hold that with the Bible, and there's contradictory words in the Bible. Like, there's things that directly contradict each other. Like, was Joseph's father? There's two different names. So there's two genealogies of Jesus in the New Testament. One in the Gospel of Matthew and one in the Gospel of Luke. And in each of them, the names are different. So it's like there's direct contradictions in the Bible, and you can't find truth, because to me, it's not meant as a history book. It's not meant as a literal truth. You're kind of it's kind of like plugging up your ears and trying to just like drown out any other. You're not thinking for yourself. And I guess that's kind of the haven that is fundamentalism, of like, in a world that has so many questions, I guess just stuffing up your ears and pretending that everything in this is exactly true, then it gives you some sense of certainty, some sense of control. And do you know what? Yeah, well, who am I to go after that? Because who am I to go after it? Because I'm not in the situation where that was ever an option, where that was ever something that I would think of doing. So I can't really judge it, but it's just coming from like my worldview, from my upbringing. It just seems absurd to me, and it seems the fundamentalism is really just coming from like the literal belief in these holy books. Just seems to be coming from a place of insecurity rather than from a place of faith. Like, you need to believe. It's like holding on for dear life to believe, rather than having faith that the Almighty wants you to explore what's going on. But God forbid we have a dance.
So talking about this faith and belief, which you talked about just a couple of seconds ago, shall I read a couple of lines from my book, which I've been writing, relating to the same thing? So it's from
what is the book about? What is the subject matter?
So it's about the existential crisis being faced by God, which obviously we humans, being all hedonistic creatures, have created for him. We humans are desire-seeking creatures, pleasure-seeking creatures, and we have given God a sort of existential crisis, which has forced God to take up silence, embrace silence. That is why God never speaks. God never spoke, and all these people are speaking, making up their own stuff. And then how silence kills God. Finally, silence kills God. And some way or the other, God resurrects. It's a philosophical fiction, for heads up. So some way or the other, God resurrects itself, and how God, from being him or her, transcends to being just an it, how that authority has been snatched away from God, and then how he resurrects and recalibrates and then gives a new morality and a new set of rules for all these people.
Interesting. that's really interesting.
Yeah, so this is what it is. So this is a paragraph from the third chapter of my book, which is as follows. Fearful is the learned more than the one not able to read. That piece of paper brings worth to life of the learned, hence eagerness dips to find something which is lost. Reality he wants to know, a piece of paper he wants to seek. A rather animated parallel which could be drawn of someone similarly preaching afterworld as if they do not trust their God's word. The eagerness seems a little too eager. The trust seems a little misjudged. The faith seems rather cheeky. The faith seems rather bad. The faith seems rather bleak. Why such eagerness? Is it either of the two? Sheer greed disguised as excitement, or a sense of rectification to the words which might never were? So yeah, this is the paragraph. So it's like
quite
it's
poetic.
Yeah, so I've been trying to keep it very poetic, so that it becomes a challenge to decipher. And you cannot slide in straight facts. I slid in a straight fact and people get offended very easily. So you cannot hit people with reality. You can just slide in metaphorically using metaphors and poetic devices.
You can hit people with reality, but I think people will hit back. They'll
not understand.
To be honest, we might be completely wrong as well, and that's something that you have to own as well. Is that like it's not like I know this is truth for certain, and you like, and like I'm talking down to someone who doesn't know. I can only come at it from the perspective that I have with what seems rational to me, and like I could definitely be wrong, but I'm not going to like, while I would respect your belief, it's I respect people's beliefs, but it's just when I'm talking about it, I can't help but try and think it through as if because I think about how it would apply to me, like of if I'm having that inner thing, that inner questioning about God, I would have to work through all these questions. So I guess I'm working through them out loud. So it's an interesting process. It's an interesting thing, but it's definitely it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, or it just rationally doesn't click with me. And
that is why go on.
I think we all need meaning. I think meaning is a fundamental. So like in positive psychology, they were kind of like playing around with the idea of positive psychology was this movement that evolved in psychology around like the 70s or 80s. A guy called Martin Seligman. And it's basically trying to answer the fundamental questions of, it's kind of getting back to like the ancient philosophy and trying to be like, well, what is the good life? And one thing they came up with was that like you need both pleasure and meaning to have a good life, to be happy. And that's a really interesting insight. So like at one extreme, you think of like the Rolling Stones or someone who's just fully given into the life of pleasure, and like like Mick Jagger isn't someone you think of as being like happy, the role model of happiness. We don't all aspire to be Mick Jagger, like giving in like drugs, sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's an interesting life, but it doesn't seem like the most fulfilling life. And then on the other side, you've got like, have you ever heard of Viktor Frankl?
No.
So he was this Jewish psychologist in the 1930s and 40s, or who in the 1930s and 40s was in the circle of psychoanalysis, and then the Nazis took over. Was he in Austria? Must have been in Germany, and he got moved to concentration camps. And it's his experience of concentration camps and what he saw and how he dealt with it. And his mantra, the thing that got him through was that Nietzsche saying, "He who has a why can handle almost any how." And his why wasn't like a religious one. It was, he was imagining himself in the future, teaching people about what he'd experienced. It was like communicating and also finding the meaning, because he came out with this great quote and he said that like no human life is complete without suffering. And this is a man coming out of like concentration camps, of like the most trying, like death-defying thing like in human history. And it's just when you read words like that, it gives you pause. And anyway, but his life is obviously an example of someone with a lot of meaning, but without much pleasure. Because while we want meaning in our lives, we don't want to be in that much displeasure. So we're looking for the the good life is life that has a lot of meaning and a lot of pleasure. And I think in the West at the moment, we have a lot of pleasure, but we're still searching for the meaning ever since the death of God. So there's still that sense of like, we've lost that objective sense of meaning, that metaphysical sense of meaning. And I think we're still searching for it. And that's why, like, I think Jungian psychology goes a good distance of the way in finding something. I think Jordan Peterson, like tapping into that Jungian psychology, I think that's part of why he's been so appealing. And he talks about Christianity as well, but I think it's because he's trying to get into those depths of meaning, because that's something that we're really thirsting for in the West. And I think that's tied in with the mental health crisis. And that's when you can look at the metaphysical, like, even if you call them lies, the religious belief systems played a very important function because they gave meaning. And I think that that's something that's missing. And I think that psychologically, that's something that's very important with religion. But I think it's a lot tougher to find it. It's a lot tougher to find meaning without a metaphysics. The beauty of metaphysics is that because, as you say, we have no experience of it, you're not going to know until you die. You just don't know. You can project anything you need to into there and give it meaning. And if you can convince people, then everyone gets meaning out of that, even if it's lies, because it can't be proven to be untrue. It's only like with the Bible, the way you prove that it's untrue is you just point out the internal inconsistencies, and you do, the stratified archaeology of examining the book. So yeah, it's challenging to find the meaning to give to suffering that allows us to get through it, because once you have that why, you can handle a lot more of life's abuses. But without it, it's much easier to get knocked down.
So what do you think that handling that why, what would be the cost of handling that why? I mean, what cost would you give to handle that why? What extent are you going to go to handle that why?
What do you mean? What do you mean cost?
What cost because I was coming from this perspective. Like, I believe that there is a sort of metric to everything. Like, we cannot measure, like, not a very, very, very distinctive metric or very solid metric, but there is a metric to measure the intensity or the magnitude of things. So a why, asking a question, why is a question, why, it comes with a magnitude of itself. You know what I mean?
I mean, like, let me give you an answer to what I think you're asking, and you can tell me whether.
Yeah, for sure. Go on.
So I used to talk to Mormon missionaries, and lovely people, and I was really charmed by the Mormon religion, but I could never pay the cost. I could never bring myself to believe in their version of history, or in their version of in their worldview. So I couldn't pay the cost, even though I could see the benefits of the community, of the, like, it made such nice people out of them, and there's clearly a lot of benefits to the religion, but I could never pay the cost of like not of believing something, or believing something that I don't actually, that I would have to turn off my rationality to do. You know what I mean? I'd have to lie to myself in order to believe in it, and that's not a cost I'd be willing to pay. I don't know if does that answer your question, or I'm not sure I'm not sure what you mean by a cost, but like, yeah, that would be an example of a cost, if I'm understanding you right.
Yeah, I tend to forget Nietzsche's that quote. If there is a why, then what was what quote
he
again?
Who has a why can handle almost any how. So he who has a why, he who has a meaning, can handle almost anything that happens to him. The why is the meaning, and the how is the experiences of life, the suffering, the joys, the depressions. So he who has a meaning to his suffering can handle a lot more suffering.
I get you. I get that. I was looking at this with a different perspective. So I pose that question to you, so so this is what the thing is. Coming from more of a, when you look at the word, what I tend to do is, whenever I tend to listen to a quote, what I tend to do is I try to decipher each and every word first in its actuality, what's the meaning in actual real life practical world, and then try to find a meaning, that not the meaning, the emotion of that particular quote. What's the emotion it's trying to project? So what's the like, if there is a scale of emotions, what's the scale it's trying to bend itself to? Is it more pessimistic or more optimistic or more positive, more a basic emotion, more ecstatic or more filled with grief? And then I tend to weave all these things and try to decipher that quote. So yeah, this is what happens inside of me whenever I listen to a quote. So that's fair, yeah. So the words which I was focusing on were why, handle, and how in this particular quote. So what's the meaning of why? So that is why I posed the magnitude, which is every why has a magnitude. So this is a new thing which I'll be putting in my book. So I'll be expanding this, that every why has a magnitude, and up to what extent are you willing to go physically and mentally to explore that why, to come up and handle your how. You know what I mean? How hard are you willing to push? That is also what counts in. To
get to the why?
To get to the how. To handle the how. To handle the how.
I mean, this is the thing about suffering, is that like when you're in the middle of that how, you're searching around for a why. There's no...
Yes, it's a paradox. Like it could be a paradox. Why and how could be a paradox in themselves.
Well, I think it's just a matter of causation. Like when you're experiencing a certain how, like when you're experiencing cold, we'll say, that's when you start to think about becoming warm. It's like the how leads you to the why. So like you go, I'm cold. Why am I cold? Oh, because the temperature is low, because I'm not wearing an extra jumper. So like it's the how causes you to think about the why, because there's an infinite number of whys to an infinite number of questions. So it's just what's prompting you to think about a certain why at a certain time. I don't think it's necessarily paradoxical. I think it's just you're only brought to think about the why when you're experiencing a certain how.
Yeah, I was thinking.
That's why we all know.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna. It's fine. Go
I was thinking with the perspective of like talking about cold and warm. So the paradox which I was talking about, that if you get cold and you're asking yourself, why am I getting cold? Then you say that this is how you're getting cold of some reason. So you're also looking for the how am I getting cold? Oh,
okay. I see what you're saying.
That might be very mediocre.
So you're taking the how as in to do with wanting to understand it. But I think in the Nietzsche quote, you're just thinking about can handle any how. The how in that, it's just put in a poetic way, but the how in that situation, or the how in that quote, is about the experience. It's a weird way to use how. I can see what you mean. It's a very unusual way to use the word how. But yeah, it's more experiences, emotions.
I get you now.
Rather than,
like the quote.
See, again, it's that when you talk about that poetic thing, it kind of confuses things a bit.
Yeah. So
you put things in poetry.
That is why I believe Nietzsche. That is what I believe Nietzsche was more famous for. Giving in some sort of, it's like a riddle. His quotes, his books are like a riddle to solve. No one can come with a singular explanation. Like there is no specific algorithm or equation which tends to solve Nietzsche, the solution which Nietzsche is trying to give, or the problem which Nietzsche is trying to preach, because anyone can interpret the quote. Like I was having Rodrigo on this channel, on this particular channel, and he's an anthropologist, and he has done his studies on Nietzsche and Michael Foucault, and he's a very learned man, and I was talking to him, and I had an altogether different perception of the quote by Nietzsche, which he gave about the abyss, and gazing into the abyss, and the abyss gazes back at you. So I was having a different perspective. Then obviously Mr. Rodrigo came in, or Professor Rodrigo, he came in and he was like, he broke that meaning which I had inside of my mind. Then
interesting. I must check that out.
Yeah, then I went to some other Reddit threads. Whenever I want to look for answers, I go to Quora or to Reddit threads. There you can see how many perspectives you are gonna get for a particular thing. So there people were trying to interpret that quote with around 7 to 8 meanings.
Yeah, I mean, that's a particularly poetic quote. That quote in particular, yeah, that's not. I'd want to read, because I can't remember what the broader context around that quote is. That's where I'd look at first for an explanation. But just that bit alone, beware of he who fights monsters, or beware of fighting monsters, he who stares long enough into the abyss, or if you stare long enough into the abyss stares back. I mean, that's a quote that it is so poetic, it could mean a lot of different things. Now, not all of Nietzsche's stuff is like that.
Not all of that. Not all of that. That is why it is famous.
He's got aphorisms like that are so short, that are so powerful, but it's all their power almost derives from a certain level of vagueness, of like it's not clear in the way that if you read, say, Wittgenstein or an analytic philosopher, it's much more like an argumentative structure. They're trying to be much more systematic, whereas Nietzsche's is borders on the artist. Like, he's very much an amazing and beautiful writer, and very, very thought-provoking.
Yeah, so
but not systematic at all.
Yeah, so this is what I've been trying to do in my book too. People refer to me to read a little bit of Nietzsche, because Mr. Rodrigo also referred that you should be reading Nietzsche, because your writing resembles not. I'll not compare myself to him. He's a great man, Friedrich Nietzsche, but he told me this, that your writing resembles a little bit, your style of speaking resembles a little bit to Nietzsche. So you should be going through how he writes and how he does his stuff. People have been recommending me, so I dived into Nietzsche because I also tend to, I do not know, like, this is my psychology of using aphorisms. Okay, casual philosophy. Aiden is here. Aiden is also a content creator.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. He's if you would have
checking out your episode with him a while ago. That's awesome.
Yeah, so he's also good.
Wittgenstein isn't clear to me either. Yeah. Wittgenstein is.
So
I can't read the Tractatus. Yeah.
So I don't know. So my my mindset when I tend to write quotes in a very which are very difficult to decode, is that you cannot slide hard facts to people. People would shut their mind off, shut their rationality off, and their dogmas would be triggered, their biases would be triggered, and they would stop their mind and would not understand a single word which you are writing inside your book. I don't know what Nietzsche was coming from. What's your take on why Nietzsche was so mysterious when it came to writing stuff?
I mean, I think Nietzsche was highly creative and had so much to say. So he's got one aphorism that says, "I strive to say in one sentence what other people strive to say in one book. Nay, what they fail to say in one book." So he's really, I think. Nietzsche has had so many insights that he was kind of leaving the work to the scholars. He was just like, I'm going to just go as far as I can go here. And in order to do that, I can't write a book on each thought, on each aphorism. So he says in The Genealogy of Morals that it's a book, it's the book that came after Beyond Good and Evil, and it's 3 essays. And he says each of these essays is an expansion on one aphorism. So he could write an essay for every one of his aphorisms. He can make a book out of the first 3 aphorisms of Beyond Good and Evil. But instead he's covering a lot of ground. So he didn't have the luxury of writing extremely long books, or of writing extremely long books on a single topic because of the nature of his philosophizing. So I think when you're writing something that's that compact, and I think with Nietzsche as well, there was a strong degree of inspiration. Like his output was, it's because it wasn't just reasoned out. There was something magical happening with Nietzsche, and other than Plato, I can't think of anyone who has done that much, who was that like purely inspired and who covered that much ground, and the audacity of the thinking. So I think with that audacity comes certain stylistic boundaries. And in the same way that why did Plato choose to write in dialogue form? I think it's because he could see things from multiple perspectives, and writing in one linear thing, maybe that's too shackling. So I think it was demanded by the nature of Nietzsche's philosophy that he write in a certain way. I don't think he was writing in order to be confusing. Like some people say Jacques Lacan, who'd be is a 20th century postmodernist, post-structuralist, who was like a neo-Freudian. His works are incredibly dense, and same with Jacques Derrida. And a lot of the complaints are that he's obfuscating, that he's making things more opaque and hard to understand than they need to be. But with Nietzsche, I don't think Nietzsche was trying to do that. I don't think he was trying to make something that was hard to understand. I think that he was very aware of style and of creating something that was beautiful, but also it was just the nature of what he was trying to communicate led the style in a certain direction.
Do you think that these people, particularly Nietzsche, as we are talking about Nietzsche, were more inclined towards in writing for the people than writing for themselves? You know what I mean? Like when I tend to write stuff, I tend to write it so that I could have it in my shelf and feel and get a sense of accomplishment or gratitude that this is what I wrote. Read it and feel a sense of well-being is a wrong word, but a sense of accomplishment for myself. And
fulfillment.
Rather, if people don't tend to get it, even if I sell 5 copies of that book, like only you take that copy, Aiden take that copy, it doesn't matter to me until and unless it's like it's an accomplishment for me. So what do you think? What would have been the case for Nietzsche?
Well, Nietzsche like repeatedly says he's not writing for everyone. He's not writing for a broad audience. He's writing for very specific. What does he call them? He calls them the basically future philosophers, but a very small subsection. Like he says repeatedly, most people aren't going to understand this, and he says my name will be associated with something terrible in the future. Like Nietzsche has a very specific audience in mind, because he's a sort of an aristocratic philosopher. Like he's not like democratic. He kind of believes that there's very specific people. One man is worth 10,000 if they've got certain abilities, which kind of Plato might tie in with when he's talking about the Guardians and the Republic. But yeah, like I think Nietzsche is writing for a very specific small subsection, and I think he's very much writing for them because he wanted to found these universities of the soul. So very small, think more like Plato's old university, but just like places for like-minded souls who are way ahead of the curve to come together and to incubate something new, something like get to the very cutting edge of thought. So that was his ambition when he was younger. I think in his last years, he was more just struggling with illness. But I think he had a very specific, I think he was writing for a very specific audience. I think he delighted in writing, without a doubt. So definitely writing for himself as well. But I don't know if anyone truly just writes for themselves. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but if you're writing a book, if you're writing philosophy, surely the meaning is social. Surely the meaning is something shared. Well, no, actually that's not true. That's not necessarily true. Like Jung's Red Book was definitely written. That's not even written for himself though. That was written because it had to be written. Because that's what his psychology demanded. That's what the collective unconscious demanded. So in Nietzsche's case anyway, I think he was writing for other people, but a very specific subsection of other people. He knew exactly who his audience were.
Yeah, because where I come from, where the mindset which I come from, like when I'm writing my book, for me it is more of, because my English was very messed up. It was filled with filth like 8 months, 10 months ago. And the emotions, I believe emotions drive your writing. And I'm like, when I'm writing my book, I do not just sit randomly and start pouring out my thoughts. I do not get any thoughts. So I have to have that some strong emotion inside of me to jot things down. So for me, writing a book is more of, my father always pushed me to learn English, the concepts of English, not concepts, good words, because he was a scholar. He was very good when it came to English, a walking dictionary kind of person. very good with English, and even in his office people tend to come, and all the seniors tend to used to come and get their English rectified by him on the website also, government websites. So for me it's more of like, I know he's not here, and he would not have liked me writing such book where I'm killing God, which is something which he would not have accepted. And we have had rift many a times because of the things I used to say. I once asked him like 12 months ago that why do we refer God as, I showed him my essay. It was more of an essay, that why do we refer God as he, right, and why not as it? Why do we give a specific gender? And we had a heated argument, and I went crying to bed. So yeah, so for me it is more of, if I write a book and if my father would have been here, he would have been proud of what I have written, the things I have churned out. No matter people read it or not, if they read it, obviously it's a good thing. People read it, people recognize the stuff, but the emotions attached to writing is more sacred to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can see if, and that's where like Jung's, I would definitely pull back and say you're always writing for other people. Like, yeah, sometimes you're just writing to work something out. You just need to figure something out for yourself. So yeah, I can get that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what the thing is, and so this is my first attempt to writing something and reading something. To be very honest, I'm reading my own stuff. So that is why I tell I do not take pride in preaching philosophy. Like, people tend to be very protective of their philosophies, protective of what they say. Like, you and I had a debate in between, right? Debate in a very, very very productive sense. So I do not tend to take pride in stuff like, okay, how dare you tend to neglect my argument or tend to make my arguments wrong. So yeah, in a nutshell, I'm still learning. So you know what I mean. Sorry for stretching this.
No, not at all. Much.
Yeah, apologies. So we'll take a couple of questions which people were saying. These Mr. Joshua and Mr. Ahmad has taken the whole chat section. You have to scroll up and see the questions. So we'll cover a couple of questions what people were
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if you want to cover any question, you can cover. If you are seeing any productive statement or question, you can go ahead. Or shall I speak it out?
Yeah, you speak it out and then
okay can, okay, what is Shubham Dukare is asking, what is the meaning to lose yourself? Can you explain? Oh, that is for me, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was your point.
For me, James, I'd also like you to cover this, after I speak a couple of lines. For me, losing yourself is just throwing everything away and just thinking that I'll leave everything to my fate, to my destiny, and let's see where destiny takes me. Destiny takes you, and it will take you nowhere. It will take you to a dead end. So for me, personally, I don't know for other people, that is what losing yourself is. Leaving everything. And and most of these religious people do this, leaving everything to God. That is what the definition of bad faith is, if I'm right, James. Like, if leaving everything to God, like they are going through something, that leave that to God. God will guide us, God will guide you, God should guide you, and all that stuff. Leaving it to a metaphysical entity is what is bad faith. I was going through a couple of lines. So yeah, what's your take on that? Lose yourself, concept of lose yourself.
Yeah. What does it mean to lose yourself? See, yeah, I could only play around with your idea of it there, because I don't really have, it's not really something I've thought about before, about losing yourself. Like, I know you can get lost in hell, and you can be, like, say, with addiction or with really like crippling depression, you can, or even psychosis, you can lose yourself. I do think it's possible to come back, but yeah, it's definitely possible to lose your solid ground, your sense of who you are. And I think actually religion at times like that can actually, as I was kind of saying with antidepressants as well, is that it can be a useful thing to help you get through. Like, I think if religion is a psychological tool that is useful and helps you to continue to be mentally stable, then that is a good thing. Then that is a definite benefit. And yeah, I think just because you're believing in religion doesn't mean you've lost yourself. Certainly not. Yeah. I don't know, does that,
another thing which just now was going through my mind, which is like when you are taking medications, and finding taking religion as to deal with your psychological tormentation, like you take medicines or you take any sort of pill, the dosage tends to increase with this is just the hypothetical analogy. So like when you are on pills or medications, the dosage tends to increase with time. With time, like depression, I've seen.
Yeah, I'm not particularly fond of the idea of being on antidepressants for your entire life. I think that is, I like, maybe there's some cases where that's a good idea, but I think that's a terrible idea. I think that antidepressants are very useful as an intervention. Again, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know, but like just from what I've read and from what I understand and from seeing people around me take antidepressants, it's useful as a tool, but it's not a way to exist. It's not. Yeah. Like, because the thing is, if it helps you, I think it's useful to help you get like to the solid ground where the depression and anxiety, so you can get out of bed in the morning, so you can start developing a routine and start putting together a life that allows you to get better. But to stay on them forever, I think that's terrible. I'm not fond of that idea at all. And I think that pharmaceutical companies, or a lot of this pharmaceutical culture is in favor of that, and I think that's a shame. Yeah,
so this is where I wanted to go, which is like if you tend to find too much of a solution in religion for your psychological whatever that is, do you think that desire would be the only thing which would be left to you? You would be seeking for more and more and more. Do you think, or is there a threshold?
Religion functions like a drug where you have to increase the dosage, because it's not actually a chemical. So like, yeah, I mean,
like for example, I'll give you an example. Like again, the religion which I know about, I'll speak of that. Like in Islam, everything is considered to be a currency. Like if you read a specific thing, a specific paragraph in Mecca, like Mecca is the holy place for Muslims. So in Mecca you go, and if you read Quran in Mecca rather reading it in some place else, you would be getting 80,000. There is a particular word which is known as sawab. Sawab, SAWAB. Sawab means it's like a currency, like 70,000 US dollars. So it's like a currency, and that currency would be credited to your bank account. That's an analogy which these people give, to credit to your bank account. So credited to your bank account, the more you pray, the more good deeds you do. Everything is taken as tokens and currencies. The more good deeds you do, the more tokens gets collected in the afterlife, and the more tokens you have, the better chances of you having the upper stage of heaven. There are 7 stages to heaven. So the more tokens you have, the luxurious heavenly stay you will have in your afterlife. So so going again to the psychology of this, we humans are pleasure seeking and desire. We humans are always seeking for desire. So like we tend to do a good deed, like we do something good for someone, or we offer a prayer and we feel good, we feel relieved out of our stress a little bit. So we think that, okay, this is something which is good for me, it is improving my life in a way. So now I tend to seek for more. So my question, this is a question, not a statement again. So my question is, would there be any threshold limit to that, or it's like an ever going process?
You mean like with that way of accounting?
Way of acquiring those tokens.
I mean, like, think about a habit. Let's say you brush your teeth every morning. Like, the more you do it, the more that becomes ingrained in your habit pattern. Like, is it becoming more ingrained? Yes, but does it make a difference to your life? no. Like it's, I think you can try and account for everything. Just like with doing moral deeds, it's the more good you do, the better you're going to feel, or the more that's going to become habitual in who you are. So maybe maybe it's not such a nonsensical idea as it seems at first glance. Of maybe it is possible to become more and more good because you do more and more good things. And the better you feel, the more you do those good things, because you realize how good it makes you feel, and you see the joy it gives to others, and so you feel more inclined to do good things. So, and let's say you do one really good thing, like say rather than just doing something small, giving someone $1 versus helping someone build a house, like those are two different levels of good thing, and the second one might make you feel a lot better and might make you feel a lot more committed. So the idea of moral things being able to be measured in different amounts, I think it does make sense. And if you really wanted to get into a measure of it, then instead of a wahab or whatever, maybe you could just have like measuring the neurochemicals, or measuring it's very hard to measure subjective things, but I don't think it's such a ridiculous idea.
Where I was coming with this, like telling people that you have been misguided is a kind of the biggest token which you can have. Like for me, many people came to me, Muslims particularly, came to me and told me that you are on the wrong path, you should be on the correct one. They are calling, as I told you, they are calling me. You know why were they calling me? The psychology behind them calling me. Let's not use the word psychology no more. The reason them calling me is because they think that if we call this guy, if we let him know that he is on the wrong path, and if we in some way or the other pull him back to the right path, we'll get a plethora of tokens, and God would be happy of us. You know what I mean? So they get out of their way. So this thing is like a disease inside of their head. So they try. So this thing is a disease. Why? Because it tends to corrupt their system, and they tend to indulge in other people's lives, because what they think is, if we as Muslims, or we as the preachers of Islam do not correct this person, we will be questioned on the day of judgment. That why didn't you correct this person? You knowing that he was misjudged. That is why
I think putting, I can see where you're coming from, like, because they're not thinking of it. If that wasn't in the Quran, then someone who came to, a lot less people would come to you, but the people coming to you would be coming to you with compassion. They'd be like, no, I genuinely want to save your soul. I'm genuinely worried about you.
No compassion at all.
I'm saying if that wasn't there, if you removed all those things, and someone who genuinely believed in the afterlife and genuinely believed that you were going to hell, then there would be room for compassion. But I think that introducing this idea of cost, introducing this idea of measuring something, and I think it does corrupt. And there's actually an interesting example that I heard last week is there was this creche in America. I think it was in America, and the parents are supposed to come at a certain time to collect the kid. Let's say 3:00, and a lot of parents were coming late, or a few parents were coming late, and so what the creche decided to do was they decided to charge people who showed up late. And what ended up happening was that more people ended up showing up late, because they'd turned it from a social cost into a material cost. So before, people would have felt guilty for showing up late. They would have felt like, oh, I'm putting you out of your way. Like, I feel bad because for the creche worker, or I'm embarrassed in front of the other parents. So there was these social costs. But once it was made into a monetary cost, more parents showed up late and just paid the cost. Because they were like, oh, it's all they have to do is pay that money. It's a transaction. It's a monetary transaction. So it's not a human transaction. So they removed the heart from the equation, and then the creche changed back, but it was too late. The damage was done. People were still showing up late. But it's just an example of, like, when if you're measuring things in terms of that kind of cost, you're kind of muddying the waters, because you're not allowing pure compassion to come into it. Now, the compassion might never have shown up. But I definitely think you're onto something there with saying it muddies the water. It contaminates the beauty of the human spirit naturally, because they're trying to save you in order to get some reward for themselves. It's kind of like affiliate marketing. They're doing affiliate marketing.
Yeah, to try to eliminate your suffering, you are putting other people in suffering.
Yeah,
in a way.
So, but like, that kind of like preaching is kind of. I like this affiliate marketing idea. It's just like the more people you bring into the religion, the higher up the pyramid you go.
That's the correct.
It just turns it into a market.
Yeah, that's the correct analogy that you gave. It's like affiliate marketing.
It's dark though. That's so grim.
Yeah. So this is. I was not able to
believe in the product. It's good.
Yeah,
they believe in the product.
The product ought to exist, which might or which might not.
Yeah, that's a problem.
You know what
rewards uncertain. We'll have to put that in the terms and conditions.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So I was trying to frame that in the first half of this session. So again, coming a drastic jump to another question. Aiden is asking. So I had one podcast with Aiden on
I was watching
aesthetics and all that stuff, tragedy. He's asking. Okay, I got to go, but maybe you can say something about Nietzsche's relationship to nihilism. Nietzsche either as a nihilist or as giving the tools to fight nihilism. Okay, this is a question which I posed. I was seeing a video online of this guy. I don't know his name, and I'll not take names, but he was claiming Nietzsche that he's the epitome of nihilism and he's the best. These were the words, I believe. He's the best nihilist that you will ever come across. So I was like, okay, with what premises or what logical reasoning are you coming to that statement that Nietzsche was a hardcore nihilist? Because what I have read, what I have heard of Nietzsche, I'm very basic when it comes to reading Nietzsche. I want you to answer this. What I know, as a beginner, is Nietzsche.
I think he's classified as an existential nihilist.
Okay, that's something. Okay.
Yeah, so like he admits the problem of nihilism. He's the one who first mentioned that God is dead. He's that parable of the madman. So definitely he's and a lot of his later work is wrestling with the problem of nihilism, because once that watershed is broken, then it's just like, well, what do you do when God is dead? There's no guarantee for our values. There's no guarantee for meaning. So we're swimming in relativism. So which is the problem of nihilism. The problem of nihilism is nothing has any value. Everything has value, so nothing has value. So that is the problem that Nietzsche is struggling with. So his way of overcoming it is to say that we must create our own values. We must come up with a new tablet of values, and that's possible for man to do. And I guess that's what Zarathustra is doing, and that's what Nietzsche was, I guess, planning to do later on with his book series, The Revaluation of All Values, or the Transvaluation of All Values. So yeah, I would consider Nietzsche a nihilist, but an existential nihilist.
Okay.
The distinction there is that he's not given into it. He's not lost to it. He's trying to create meaning in a world that has none. So he believes that the burden of meaning rests with man. Man must create his own meaning. So it's
what is
nihilism, but it's creative nihilism.
So what is optimistic nihilism? Like what I've heard is since there is no meaning to life, you can provide one. So is that optimistic nihilism?
I mean, is that not optimistic nihilism? If you can create your own meaning, for Nietzsche, that's a joyous thing that you can create your own meaning.
Yeah.
That's beautiful because you can shape the world. Yeah, you can now actively shape the world. We always could shape the world, but now that we can create our own values, create our own meaning, then yeah, we can shape the way the world is. So, I was thinking of this particular thing, and please, I want your statements on that. It might sound very mediocre to you, but again, coming out from a beginner, which is the concept of nihilism and free will. Not going too much into the depths of free will, but the thing is, what nihilists say is there is no meaning to life. Life is pointless. In a nutshell, it's a very big philosophical world in itself. But in a nutshell, we'll not elaborate it too much. Life has no meaning and life is pointless. So what I tend to, first of all, the cool dudes, which the Gen Z people and the cool dudes who tend to call themselves as nihilists have gone only through this definition of nihilist. Life is meaningless. No point to life. YOLO. It's essentially YOLO.
Yeah. So my only argument to them is, which is you preaching this is a meaning in itself. You are trying to give a meaning, so you are not a nihilist. First things first. Second thing is, I was thinking of.
Oh well, I'd draw the distinction there because nihilism, like, it isn't saying you have no meaning. It's saying there's no objective meaning. It depends on how you take nihilism, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it is. But because the statement is very singular, the statement is very singular, and people buy into that argument. Like
people, I can see the appeal of it.
Yeah. So the thing
There's
is,
a liberation that would come with that.
Yeah. So the thing is, I was like if you preach that there is no meaning to life and life has no meaning, okay, what would you do if life has no meaning? You're saying life has no meaning. Saying that is like providing a meaning to life. If like the next step you would take is say life has no meaning, like this is what one guy was saying, I've been reading nihilism for 5 years and life has no meaning, so we should all go for suicide. These are his words, like life has no meaning. So I was like, even if you take a step, take your life away, even if you sit in the corner of your room saying there is no meaning to life, there is, willingly or unwillingly, you are providing that meaning to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think the problem of nihilism isn't a sense of meaning, because humans, as long as they're alive, have meaning. You can't live without any sense of meaning, even if it's like survival is a form of meaning, you know? So you will always have meaning, but the problem of nihilism, as it began with Nietzsche in the 1880s, is there is no objective meaning to life.
Objective
life.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no, like, if the meaning is only a construct of your biology, then that's not objective meaning. That's just like, you will inevitably have meaning unless you commit suicide. Unless you're dead, you have meaning.
But going through that process of suicide, going through that process of suicide, taking some pills to take your life away, or hanging yourself from the fan, is that process is a process of you giving meaning to something. You're dead, that's a different thing. But that process is providing a meaning.
Yeah, even to get to the point where you're committing suicide, you're making a value judgment, which is meaning. You're saying that, like, and this was where Nietzsche took it, was that, like, Nietzsche said, okay, there's no objective meaning, but what was important for him was, is the life you're living, are you life-affirming, are you life-denying? And his problem with the Abrahamic religions, with religion in general, and slave morality, is that it's, well, not slave morality, but with is that it's life-denying. The ascetic ideal, that's what I was trying to think of. It's life-denying. It's saying that life is, it's devaluing life. Because it's like the whole thing of the afterlife is saying that this life has no meaning. This is merely practice for the eternity that comes afterwards. So the religions of the ascetic ideal, which is basically all religions, are denigrating this life in order to big up the life that comes afterwards. Whereas Nietzsche wants to invert that, and he wants to say, I love this life, this world, this limited being. Nietzsche would never preach suicide, because it's this love of this reality. And that's, like, one of his big things was and this comes in Thus Spoke Zarathustra as well, and in The Gay Science, is I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's the eternal recurrence. This idea that if a demon came to you in the middle of the night,
I've heard that,
you know this idea. So it's like, can you say yes to this life? Nothing will change. You're living the exact life you're living today, with all the sufferings, with all the highs, with all the lows. Nothing changes. Could you say yes to this over and over and over and over to eternity? Or would that idea drive you mad? And that, for Nietzsche, was the ultimate affirmation of life. That was to say yes to life. And the most meaningful thing of life can have meaning without metaphysics, without the objective meaning. This is enough. So that's Nietzsche's, like, existential nihilism. It's staring into that abyss, to go back to that quote, and it's finding a way to say yes to it. It's finding a way to say yes to the darkness, to the highs and to the lows. So that's Nietzsche's quest of meaning, and that's Nietzsche's whole quest in his later works.
Yeah, so this is where I was coming to. Like, you do something or not do something, there is an inherent meaning to your life. So is the concept of free will destroyed because of that? Because we are not having a free will, because there is a meaning to everything which we do or not do. Is it more related to we having no free will?
Well, I think Nietzsche and existentialism they have a strong emphasis on free will. Whereas I would say the other way around, the religious way, like what I was saying there, with if you're an Inuit, or if you're a Mayan, an Aztec, those people never had a choice to convert to Islam, so they were always doomed to hell. So like, there's almost a sense of determinism there, but that's again about their next life. Is this life determined? Yeah, I think nihilism doesn't entail determinism at all. If anything, it generally brings more of a sense of free will, because you can create your meaning. So
because my definition for free will is very bleak. Then I'll have to look into it. So yeah, this was pretty much this. We are in 1 hour and 50 minutes.
Oh well, okay, yeah, that's good.
So so people, Mr. Joshua is still.
Thank you for the questions, though. I appreciate the questions. That was interesting, and it's cool to do a live stream. This has been fun.
Yeah, that is what the thing.
Joshua likes Jesus, is he? Is that what I'm seeing here?
You love Jesus and all that stuff. Okay.
No, this has been cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and it was a good one. Thank you
everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in, and not very soon, but we can do this again anytime in the near future.
Man, yeah.
Have a conversation. You having a cup of what were you sipping in between?
Oh, this is actually just water.
Okay, water.
This is a cup from a friend sent me from. Have you heard of Lord of the Rings? Do you like Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I've seen.
I have a friend living in New Zealand, and this is from the cup of the Green Dragon. So he sent it back to me because I'm a massive fan of Lord of the Rings. So it's a
I've seen that.
It's my
interesting film. The best part is them killing all the orcs and they killing all the human beings, trying to kill the human beings. Not human beings, but actually all what fairy world terminologies that they use. Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite's just the Shire. Just like the very start of the first movie, it's just like this peaceful. I love the Shire, and the music is amazing.
The Two Towers is the best one. The way I don't know why I like movies which prepare you for war. You're preparing for a war, for a battle, and they're preparing everything, and all that stuff.
I just love the peace of the Shire. My favorite movie is definitely the first one. But yeah, I think I used to. I think the second one was the Two Towers was probably my favorite for a while. But yeah, no, just all like constantly now. It's all about the Fellowship of the Ring. First movie is just amazing.
Yeah,
I love it.
So recently I was tuned into John Wick. Have you seen John Wick?
No.
That's it's starring Keanu Reeves, and it's a very good movie. One of the best I've ever come across. So I watched all the 3 movies at a go. The attitude that guy had. I'll be making a video on my Hindi channel.
You said John Wick.
Yeah, John Wick. John Wick.
Check it out.
Yeah, the attitude that guy has is something. Yeah, which I just
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves and the attitude, which I resonated to very much. And I'll be making a video on my Hindi channel most probably on the philosophy of John Wick.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, so that's what it is.
I must check him out. Yeah. I just watched the new Matrix last week. So
Matrix. Okay.
Yeah, I like Keanu Reeves.
He's an actor with less words, with more expressions, but he speaks too much through his expressions.
He speaks. Well, he is an actor.
Yeah, he's a good actor. So thank you, man, James.
Cool for us. Yeah, thanks for having me.
For joining in. Thank you all the people. Apart from the debate which was going on, which I didn't appreciate because you guys should exchange your numbers and have a hell of a time together. Be in a relationship together. It will rock. So yeah, go have a relationship.
I'm sure they're gonna love that comment.
Yeah, you're gonna love that conversation. Thank you for indirectly or directly spoiling the chat, but still we had fun. And all the people, Tane. Okay, we had Tane, Karthik. Do suffering overcome by praying? Okay, we have answered all these questions. Karthik, Tane, Shubham, all these people. Thank you for joining in. And yeah, man, let's end this. And I've mentioned James' channel in the description of my video. You can go and check that out. You'll get a head start towards philosophy. So I've started 100-day on my Hindi channel. I've started 100-day masterclass for philosophy. I'll be uploading videos for 100 days.
That's how I started. But YouTube, I did 100 videos in 100 days. That was my starting point.
Okay. Oh, Okay, so this will be a masterclass from beginner to advanced. So yeah, Aiden, I'll be pinging you on how to read some research papers, because that is what I'll be doing. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, James. Have a good night if you are.
See you later, guys.
Yeah, if you are in India, and have a good day if you are someplace else, whatever that is. Thank you so much for joining in. Take care.
See you later.
Okay, so I'll just end